We're
Okay,
live,
thank you very
right,
much.
okay.
So welcome. Now, apologies and attendance. Sue.
Right, I'll read out for you to confirm your attendance. Right, Councillor Perry,
Yes.
Councillor McNair-Scott,
Yes.
Councillor Brooks,
Present.
Councillor Irish,
Present.
Margaret Boyne, Sheikh Fazl of Vaskatu,
Present.
Danny Harble, Chris Hughes,
Yes.
Elizabeth Jenkinson,
Present.
Rhian Jones, Charmian Harrison,
Present.
Yasmin Hussein, I know is going to be late, Ellie Stewart, Lisa Marie Taylor, Rachel Jackson, Jill Heron, Rhiannon Love, and Chris Robinson. I have apologies from Alistair Richardson, Julie Kelly, Sue Bowen, Jeff Williams, and John Hamer.
Sue, I think you've missed myself and Howard out.
And myself, Sushma.
And me.
And also
And
me.
as well. And me, Maureen.
All right.
And me.
Sushma, yeah, I was going to say, have I missed anybody out? Yes. Howard, yes. Rob, yes. Rob Sanders, yes. Thank you.
Lisa
has just arrived, I believe.
Yes.
If you go to the meeting chat, it's actually logging the late joinees or recent joinees, I can see.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, I've got Rhian and Lisa. Yes. Thank you.
Right, so that's okay. So thank you again. A reminder, if you weren't here, right, just before we started, if you're not speaking, please would you mute your microphones to stop any feedback over the system. It makes it easier for us all to hear what is going on. Item 2 is declarations of interest. And I have to remind you, if you have any disclosable pecuniary interest to be discussed, you can either declare it now or declare it at the time the item is discussed. And we have 2 regular declarations from Justine, who works for Natry as an RA ambassador, and Elizabeth Jenkinson as a judge for the West Hill Awards, which gives grants to Sacres. Are there any other declarations? Right, no one's come up. Agenda item 3 is the minutes of the last meeting. It was held virtually on 3rd of November. Are you all agreed? If there are any concerns about those minutes, please speak up now. If not, I'll accept that they're agreed. Right, I'm seeing no hands go up other than the hands up. So yes, they're agreed. Item 4 is deputations. There are no deputations that we've been notified of today, so we're not receiving any deputations. Item 5 is chairman's announcements. Number 1, I have to tell you this will be my last meeting as the chairman of the Sacre. The county council elections are scheduled for May the 6th. They are going ahead, and I will not be standing for election as a county councillor this time. I was first elected in 1970, so I think 51 years is more than enough for anybody. So this will be my last meeting, and I will certainly continue, however, to watch with interest the work of Sacre. The Interfaith Calendar, there are still some for 2021 available. I don't think it gives the dates for COVID lockdown and lock up and open, but if anybody would like some, there are some available. And I am very hopeful that we will go ahead with an interfaith calendar for 2022. I think that is one of the really positive and certainly a tangible step that we have made in the work of the Sacre. So I think those are really the only announcements that I wanted to make. Are there any of you have contact with schools, colleges to encourage entrance for 2022? If we have to vote today, which I think one or two items we do, there's an electronic poll meeting, electronic poll system, and Sue will explain how that operates. Anna, I see you have a hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to let you know that it's my last meeting as well, because I also am not standing for election. And I shall miss it because I was a past chairman of Sacre.
Yes, yes.
I always found it very interesting and enjoyed it.
Thank you for everything that you have done for Sacre. I'm about to take on, because I'm only the same age as the President of the United States, so I think it's still permissible to take on new roles. I'm about to become a church warden again. And one of my first letters will be to the Archbishop of Canterbury to ask him and the Prime Minister why, if it's allowed to go out electioneering, which apparently it will be, to canvass and deliver, but apparently we're still banned from singing hymns in churches. And I'm not quite sure that I reckon that that's acceptable, but that's a side issue. Right, agenda item 6, membership of Sacre. And I'll hand over to Pat Hannam to speak.
Can I just first of all note that Howard Wright has got his hand up, so.
Ah, sorry, I missed that, Howard.
Councillor, I think we should note, should we not, our thanks as a whole Sacre to you for your service to us, and Councillor McNair Scott as well. I mean, you know, we can't let that pass, can we? I mean, on behalf of myself, really, and also everyone else, I think thank you to both of you for your service. That's a very long sentence that you've suffered, so well done.
It wasn't 50 years on Sacre there, but
no, I realise that, but yeah, no, thank you.
I started life on the allotments committee of Eastern Borough Council, so it's impinged on my memory. Okay, but thank you for that, and I appreciate those comments, as I'm sure does Anna, and Anna's service certainly to Sacre has been a lot longer than mine. Right, membership. Patricia, or Pat.
Okay, so we have a brief membership report in front of us. Yes. I'm going to need some prompts from Sue here. Membership report. I would just like to say we do have some gaps on Sacre that we are looking to fill, most notably from the Roman Catholic Church, and I have recently written again to the Diocesan Education Director. I'm awaiting a response for that. We are also looking for a Sikh representative on Sacre, and I've just found a new avenue of communication for that I'm in the process of following up in the light of my involvement in another Sacre. We also last time had our co-option from Governor's Services step down. And likewise, I'm in correspondence with Governor Services, and I'm awaiting a response for that. So there's a number of matters in hand, I think would be the best thing to say. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got one or two contacts with the Sikh community. If you have any difficulties, I'm certainly happy to.
Yes, we've tried various formal channels, and that's not found anything. So now we're looking at other. It's very important, given the representative
certainly
community. Yeah.
Okay, our action, we have to note that. So members agree that we should note that reports. Item
Can I
7.
just say,
Thank
sorry,
you.
Councillor Perry, can I just mention we need to mention that Amanda Kaywood, the representative from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, resigned. So we will be looking for a new member for them.
Yes.
Okay, so a letter will be sent to the community. We've got the contact, haven't we, to
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. So we can move on then to item 7, which is the monitoring group report. And again, it's over to Pat Hannam to present this report.
Okay. So regarding the draft action plan, in light of the imminence of our agreed syllabus and how COVID-19 has impacted on meetings and so on and so forth, we have put forward bringing the 3-year action plan 21-24 to the June meeting. And our proposal is that a draft goes to the next monitoring group and is discussed in detail, and then from the monitoring group the 3-year plan will be presented. Hopefully we have a clearer sense of training, for example, in relation to the new syllabus and teachers, and to what extent we may be able to envisage face-to-face or whether we're doing just remote teacher education. That's very important. So I'll just otherwise go through elements. I think, first of all, if we could ask Justine to speak to the primary training and networks and so on and so forth that has run this term, and then I'll pick up on secondary before we move on to the next point with governors.
Okay, so I will come in and pick up page 10. And before I just talk to primary, I'm just going to mention item 8 there on the annual survey of withdrawal in Hampshire schools. And we always do an annual survey on withdrawal from all parts of RE and all other parts of collective worship. This year it was due to take place last term, the autumn term, but because obviously of restrictions over the summer and children coming back late, we decided to do that in the spring term. And then, of course, we had the lockdown happen. So it is proposed that it will happen, but it will happen in the summer term. And really, it's just to let SACRE know that, but it will happen as usual. In terms of primary training, there has been a lot running this period. And of course, it's all been online and through Teams. And that feature has allowed a lot of different people to attend training and to attend more flexibly than normal. So that's been a positive thing to note. In terms of highlights of what I've done, I have held the course on how to manage RE for new RE leaders. And about 10 or so teachers came on that, and there's a further one planned shortly. And we've managed to get the primary RE networks up and running again for this year. And to help with teachers' attendance, they're taking place after school so that teachers don't have to be released from bubbles or different arrangements that are going on in schools. As well as that, I've run collective worship course in December, and there's a further one of those planned too. And both Pat and I have run spiritual, moral, social, cultural training for school leaders and for school governors. And the governor training is over the page. And they've been very well attended too. In terms of other courses, there's been RE for SENCO coordinators right across Hampshire schools, where lots of coordinators attended. And RE in the Ofsted requirements, we have run a course on that and assessment in RE. And something that has happened really new since lockdown last year is I've started to run webinars for teachers that are no more than an hour on updating subject knowledge on Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and further subjects are planned for other religions and non-religious worldviews. And something that I know Pat will speak about later in National RE Matters, I organised a talk with Trevor Cooling, chair of the REC, to talk about worldviews in RE for teachers. That was part of my NATRE ambassador role, and it was open to Hampshire teachers too, and several took part in that in December 2020, and we'll talk more about that later. So it's been a busy period, and it's had a lot of training involved online, which has had a lot of success to it.
So if I pick up on the secondary, we've been able to run a tremendous amount of events really virtually, and in a curious way there have been some new opportunities presented to us because we've got this new technology. So I've run secondary RE network meetings where we've in a way been in contact with more secondary RE teachers than we have been for some years, in meeting in a room, a virtual room if you like. We weren't able, unfortunately, as we know, to hold the secondary RE conference in October. That was just beyond us in terms of complexity. However, the keynote speakers, we've been able to plan to run those as webinars, as Justine. I've been running the secondary ones from 6 o'clock till 7:30. So we ran the first of those a few weeks ago with Alistair Richardson from Winchester University on the theme of Holocaust education and religious education. And it was a very moving, he gave an hour presentation, we then had a break and then followed up with questions. It was incredibly well received. And we also had some attendees from people outside Hampshire. So these have served as a kind of shop window for the offer that we have in Hampshire. The second one of those should have been with our colleague who's in Sarajevo, and we've had to postpone that due to some personal circumstances. We were going to look at RE in relation to genocide and the complexity of religious situation there in Bosnia. We are holding another webinar on the 15th of March, looking at hermeneutics and religious education. Again, this is intended to secondary RE practitioners, but these words are very much on the top of people's language, if you like. They're being discussed in the RE world, and we've been able to bring some of the greatest national scholars together for an evening's exploration with secondary teachers. And again, these are things there's no way we would have been able to do that without having access to Teams. And yeah, just to say, I've also been doing governor services training. I've also been doing some one-to-one visits to some schools, which is also a very important thing to be able to continue doing, although of course all of these are run virtually. So I think I've just picked up my point 10 of virtual visits. Justine, do you want to pick up about virtual visits that you've made to primary?
Yes, so normally each year I make about 8 visits to schools, and this year I've held 6 now. Actually, it was 5 at the time of writing this and now 6. I've done some virtual visits to school for primary RE. Normally when we visit schools, we go in person and we look at planning and teaching and work from children. And obviously that's not been possible with lockdown, but it has been possible to do some of those things through a virtual meeting. So I've arranged those with RE leaders, and we've looked at planning, and we've looked at how that planning links to school ethos and aims. We've been able to look at some children's work pre-prepared that has been sent to me, so it's possible on Teams. We haven't been able to look at teaching, but we have done several of the areas that we would do on a visit, and the emphasis there has been on providing advice and support with that. So leaders have asked for time looking at using the cycle of inquiry, improving the quality of RE work, and looking at work and suggestions for improvement or greater depth. And there are some more of those planned before the end of March 2020.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add to the report?
Yeah, the next point on the report, item 11, although subject level data has not been available to local authorities in the way it might have been done formerly, we have been able to access some data through our national RE networks, which for 2020, which you can see there in item 11. Now, this does continue to concern us and SACRE in relation to the percentage, the relatively low percentage of children who have access to GCSE full course religious studies in Hampshire schools. I'm just pausing there for you to kind of redigest that. So this has been a regular discussion point over the years, but what we've seen in the last 3 years is a continued, we saw a rapid decline from about 37% of children entering full course to now where we are at around 26%. And our question obviously is, well, what are the children, the 3/4 pretty much of Hampshire children in year 11 who are not able to access a GCSE, what actually is happening? What opportunities do they have to access high quality religious education at Key Stage 4? Now, we do know of some very good centres of excellence in Hampshire where children have an option to take up a GCSE full course, where all of them also have the opportunity to access a high quality non-exam course. Now, that is a very, very positive alternative if it's a good quality course taught either by qualified specialist RE teachers or else by non-specialist specialists, you could say. But we're fairly certain that there are schools where children aren't able to access any religious education at Key Stage 4. So that means in the upper 2 or sometimes 3 years of the secondary school. So we have a recommendation. I think if I get to the end of the report and then perhaps Councillor Perry, we could take some questions, but
Sure.
What we've put as a recommendation there is that basically SACRE, if you're in agreement, asks me to take this matter up with my colleagues in HIAS again. The final point on the monitoring group report is simply to update SACRE about progress that we're making on the review of the agreed syllabus as we move towards what will be called Living Difference 4. We've actually had a further, since the report was written, we've had a further focus group meeting with teachers that was well attended, and some people here attended that meeting on the 24th of February. We are in an incredibly privileged position to be able to make a thorough, reflected review, not a detailed revision. We're not rewriting it, but we are able to go through the thing and make sure that what we have for the autumn of 2021 here, we'll bring to an agreed syllabus conference in our October meeting. What we have is absolutely responding to the national issues for religious education and remains on the cutting edge of high quality religious education, something I hope Hampshire can continue to be proud of. Justine, is there anything else you'd like to add? Otherwise, I'd, through Councillor Perry, be happy to field questions, I think.
I think the only thing to add is that we're in the process of thoroughly reviewing every area, and some things to highlight. We have reviewed the EYFS, the early years reception age children section of the syllabus with advisors and with teachers. With Carson, who's attending here today, we've been taking a detailed look at special educational needs. and we have been taking detailed looks at progression and assessment with colleagues in Hampshire and also in the neighbouring boroughs too, such as Southampton, so that we take account of wider movements that relate to our syllabus. And that's still ongoing at the minute. We are still involved in as many discussions as we can have before we actually sit down and think about the amendments and the tweaks that we will make. So it's a very thorough process. I would just re-echo there what Pat has said.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on to an element of this in the next report, but I would like to reassure members of SACRE that we are taking the utmost care over reviewing, in very particular, the religious dimension. So the concepts, as they're termed in the current syllabus, in relation to each religion, we've been taking the utmost care to speak with scholars as well as eminent practitioners within each of the faith communities. I won't mention any names, but you can ask and inquire. And there are people in the room here with whom we have meetings arranged in the next few weeks too.
Right, then are there any questions or comments to Patricia or Justine? If you've got a hand raising option on the screen, or Anna, I see you're with a hand up.
Right, I'd really just like to say well done. I mean, I think what you've managed to do over this incredibly difficult time, and you found a kind of silver lining, because I think more teachers have attended courses and all sorts of things, and I just think you turned something that was very negative on the whole into something really positive. So well done.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, on that point, I mean, I think we've all experienced that there have been some advantages in having the Zoom type meetings. Should we, or do we need to send a note to the County Council to say in the future maybe hybrid meetings should be maintained? I mean, clearly there are benefits in everybody getting together, but equally the amount of time that goes into those, certainly for teachers, I think I can well understand that they would find it easier to come in remotely, and it shouldn't take too much in the way of additional resource from the County Council to provide that. I assume that's being discussed. I don't know, Patricia, if you know that.
I don't. I need to check that. I entirely appreciate the extent of what you're suggesting, but one thing I would like to say is that, to extend an invitation, is that we will be holding another focus meeting with teachers in the first couple of weeks after Easter. We haven't entirely fixed the date yet, but I think perhaps through Sue we could extend an invitation to SACRE members if they would like to listen in on that meeting and keep completely au fait with the adjustments that we are making and the extent to which we are consulting with teachers over this. You'd be very welcome, and I think it could be quite a positive opportunity really for people to come and listen in. So when in the autumn meeting, there's no big surprises, as it were. But Councillor Perry, did you mean SACRE meetings, that we could have some face-to-face as well going forward?
Indeed, I think SACRE meetings, I think training sessions. I mean, we don't want to make it too easy for people not to attend, but equally, I think we want to facilitate those people who can't, because there has been bigger attendance at all sorts of meetings. I mean, I will just speak quite separately, nothing to do with SACRE, with the Chief Executive and others in the County Council, but if SACRE think it would be helpful, then we can just note that we've maybe at the end of this report that we have seen some advantages and would welcome a hybrid type system continuing if practical.
I mean, if it's appropriate for me to say so, I would think that could be perhaps added as a recommendation.
Okay, if members agree.
There definitely have been some unexpected advantages.
Yes.
Obviously, there have been a tremendous number of disadvantages, but in the way, for example, schools are communicating with parents, there have been some advantages, but certainly we've been able to more easily communicate with more teachers over the review.
Yeah.
That's definite. And it's been economic.
Sure, sure. I mean, obviously with school visits, that is not something one would want to continue as remote. Correct to say, I'm sure there are no schools in Hampshire where it would happen, but one does hear anecdotes of awkward children being put in the corner and told to keep quiet and threatened with all sorts of things that an experienced visitor would certainly detect and note. Not Hampshire, but maybe other places. But meetings where time can be saved, then it's worth continuing. Shall we move to the recommendations then, and we'll add that one as a second one. Now, I'm not sure Sue's going to tell me what I have to do on the voting on this, but we presumably can take it if anybody objects, and then we'll have a vote. But otherwise, can we take them? The members agree. I've got the recommendations on page 9, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Is there anybody who wants to register either an anti-vote or an abstention on any of those recommendations? Speak up.
Councillor Perry, I think
yes.
Kate is going to sort the polls out. She's the one who knows everything about it. She's got them set up.
That?
I launched the poll now, Councillor Perry. If you'd like, if you're happy to give it a go. It's the first time we've done it in a SACRE meeting.
Well, okay, give it a go.
So I'm just launching it now. So hopefully everyone will have something pop up on the screen where people's faces are at the moment, and it will give you the option to vote for, against, or to abstain. So you just need to select which one you wish to do and then click submit. If it will also appear in the chat. So if it doesn't appear on your screen automatically, if you go to the chat, it will also be there as well.
Now this is saying item 7 recommendations, but is that all the recommendations? What if you support?
Yes, that's the recommendations taken as a whole. Yes, as we would normally in a physical meeting.
What? That's not normal. When I vote on something, and if there are different recommendations, I can have different. As it happens, obviously, I support them all, and there's no problem. But that wouldn't be normal, would it?
Okay. Well, it depends on the item, and in the item in question. Obviously, if there's been any debate or if there's any contention, then obviously we would take recommendations individually. But generally, if everybody seems happy, then we will consolidate them together as a whole, if everyone's happy to do that.
Okay, well, so we
and I'm just looking at, and we have a majority in favour of the recommendations, so they're carried.
Right. Okay. Done.
Did we want to add another one? Was that the idea that we added an extra one on?
Should it simply be that we will investigate the practicality of having future hybrid meetings? That doesn't commit us too far, does it? But it indicates that we want to look at that.
Yes.
Yes. So we're going to investigate in future hybrid meetings and conferences. Okay, thank you. So I've got to move on. That was the monitoring group reports. Item 8, pages 15 to 17 on your pack of papers is key national RE matters. The so-called RE here. And that again is over to Pat to present that report.
Yes, thank you so much. We are hoping that we might be able to instigate a little bit of discussion during this item. But the background there is, as you know, the Commission on RE report was published in September 2018. We had a visit from now Professor Faraj Panjwani to our Sacre meeting in the summer of 2017, and Farid was a member of the commission. Justine and I, both at different opportunities, gave evidence to the commission, and we continue to be very much involved with the discussions nationally. And it's very important for us right now as Hampshire Sacre, as we are in the process of reviewing our agreed syllabus. Broadly speaking, one of the biggest decisions that we have to make in the review is the extent to which we acknowledge or take on board the national discussion in relation to worldviews. You can see a little bit of background there. I was elected to the board of the REC last May, and Justine's currently the co-chair of ARIAC. All of these are forums where the worldviews discussions are going on. So we have a wonderful permeable relationship, you could say, with the national and the local here. I've put in the report a link to 2 national reports. The first of which, the second one which is there, the Theos report. If you were only to be able to look at one of them, that was the one that I would really recommend as being highly accessible for the lay reader, you could say. We can't avoid, we wouldn't want to, we must engage with the worldviews debate. I would say that nationally, there are many people that regard what is going on now as significant a turning point in our subject, as we saw during the late 1970s, when this subject moved from what I would have experienced at school, and some of you as well here, as what was essentially a very confessional approach. I had one of those grammar school type educations in North Kent, and what I received was Paul's Journeys, and we read A Man Born to be King. I didn't hear anything about other religions in my religious education course at school. All that changed in the late 70s when we had 2 seminal syllabuses, one which was the Birmingham Agreed Syllabus of 1975, but the other one was the Hampshire Agreed Syllabus of 1978. That syllabus of 1978 recognized that there were 2 key elements. One was it really matters what you bring into the classroom to teach, but what also matters is how you teach it. So when I'm talking about this locally as well as nationally now, I will say we're in the Hampshire lineage, you could say. The Hampshire lineage for religious education is one that recognizes these sort of 2 arms that go hand in hand and together, how we teach and what it is that we're teaching. And I think many of us feel that this worldviews discussion is as significant as a shift as the one that was experienced. Now, I've got a very short PowerPoint, 4 slides, please, that I'd like to share with you to open up the conversation before we then move to the people perhaps who were at the conference yesterday to see if there's anything to add. And then, Justine, if you come in at that point with anything that we haven't covered, and then if it's okay, we could field a bit of a discussion. So this worked earlier. Should be a very smooth for me just to share. So I'm very aware that there'll be people here, some of whom are more or less highly engaged with the discussion already, and for many it will be rather a newer territory. But as I've already said, can I just check, Sue, and if Katie, can everybody see this?
It's okay with me, I can see it.
Good.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
as I've already said, it was the RE Council in 2018 that made this quite radical proposal that the subject title should be changed to religion and worldviews. And the critical discussion before us in the next few months is the extent to which we engage with that in the review of our agreed syllabus. So it's also still absolutely clear that it's not clear. It's not everybody is agreed that this shift means the same thing. For some people, they're understanding it to mean a shift to including more stuff in the classroom, in the curriculum. But many people say, well, there's a problem with that. We've already only got one lesson a week in the secondary school or equivalent in the primary school. How can we possibly load that with more stuff? So there is another aspect of this that emerges for us as agreed syllabus makers, is that this really means, no, it doesn't mean just more stuff. The shift is away from an objective, entirely objective study, essentialized study of separate religious traditions, much more to a reorienting, a refocus on the lived experience. And within that, it enables us to give a huge focus onto the diversity that is what it means to live life with a religious orientation or otherwise. But there is a third aspect to this that is emerging, and this is as well as, or instead of, but probably as well as, or both of those, it means a reorienting of the subject much more closely to the child's interests and the child's needs, you could say, at this point in history. Now, on the extended reflections that we've been doing over the last more than a year now, I think we're coming to the conclusion that already Living Difference approach that we have in Hampshire for a while, but particularly since 2016, is up for handling this kind of ambiguity. This is because we have a strong pedagogy, we would say, the cycle of inquiry, which already starts with young people's experiences. And I would want to really flag up and celebrate the research work of Clive Erica and his wife, Jane Erica, who was professor at Winchester University until her retirement, but a marvelous piece of work that they published 20 years ago in relation to why it's important that we start with children's experiences. And right now, that's what we do. We start with the child's experience before we then introduce them to something more intellectually engaging, some new materials that might be very challenging. So we do that. We already start with the life of the child, but we don't leave it there. We have intellectual engagement as well. We already are interested in the lived experience. And in particular, what we have in the contextualized step is where we would always have a case study, where we may go and visit a place of worship, where we would bring a person from a faith tradition into the classroom. This is already what we do. So this emphasis on lived experience is already an invaluable part of the work of Living Difference, and it will be going forward. And the inquire step there, which is the intellectual engagement, we can engage with many things in that. So I think in terms of how are we responding to the worldviews questions, we feel that we already have a fairly good grasp of that. I'll move slightly faster through the next slides. As I've said, the cycle of inquiry starts with young people's experiences. We're already interested in the lived experience, and the inquire step can include many things. But more and more when we think about what does it mean to live a life in a particular tradition, or often it's not one thing, although people may be guided in their lives by the particular emphases. There may be parts of their lives that are more secularly oriented, if you like, And then our research in all of this is making us realize that even the gap between secular and sacred is perhaps a forced one as well. So, but we already feel that we can handle this ambiguity, and I'll invite our secondary and primary teachers that are here perhaps to chip in with me shortly. We feel that we're pretty good at handling this fuzzy edges that is our subject matter. And actually, this ability to handle ambiguity is what is perhaps a mark of high quality RE. Nevertheless, what we think we'll do is, rather than change our purpose statement too radically, we think we will add an extended appendix that will have about 1,500 words on how we relate to the religion and worldviews discussion, as well as another 1,500 words that sort of appendix that responds to where we sit this educationally. We do want Living Difference 4 to be theoretically sound and practically helpful, better than that for teachers. So we want it to be able to do both. So it will be well referenced with a bibliography, for example. However, and this is where I would welcome opening up a discussion now, is we realize that it's not straightforward really to represent a particular faith tradition, because there is a great deal of inner diversity there. And we would welcome your thoughts, particularly from people, well, teachers, as well as those from a faith background here. And please, as I've mentioned earlier, consider attending the next teacher discussion. It probably isn't going to be the 27th. I put it in there and then we realize actually there's a clash. So the date will be circulated. And I already have put a link to this report in the agenda for this meeting and the report for this item. So I would recommend that you, if you wanted to choose one thing to read with this meeting, I would recommend that publication. It still raises more questions than answers, but it's a good read, you could say. Councillor Perry, I wonder whether it would be helpful to see whether colleagues that attended yesterday's Southwest Ariak Sacre conference might have something they would like to add before we then hear from other members of Sacre.
Right, yes, certainly. So would anybody like to chip in now? I listened in on that, and I'm very sympathetic to what's being sought to achieve here. The one problem I have, and hopefully somebody here will put me right, is actually the name worldviews. For a while, it was beginning to sound like geography, and I wonder what the average child, particularly if they have to make any choice of what they're going to study, would think what worldviews is. But I'm sure there's a lot of thought has gone into that, and it's always easy to question something. It's a lot harder to say here, this is an obvious alternative. But was there a lot of debate on picking that term worldviews, and presumably it's designed to include thoughts not related to particular faiths, to humanism and so on?
I mean, I'll immediately pick that up. There is an international literature around this term worldview, and the other report that I've put a link to in the notes of this, the report for this item of this meeting, is a more extended literature review that was undertaken. Yeah, the word is, although there is a body of literature, you could say internationally around it, is a contested term, to use that sort of language. And some of us in the RE world feel that it doesn't sufficiently represent what we might call the more cosmological aspects of religion, because it may seem like it's very limited to the physical world.
Yes.
Whereas what it means to live a religious life is often not about that, or not only about that. However, people, when you read the literature review, clearly there are people that would argue it does include that. It's how it's theorized. At present, our position probably is that we think that the term is still so unclear that we won't name it explicitly in the report in our agreed syllabus. I'm aware we're being broadcast here, but that we will include a clear explanation of our relationship to the term and all the literature in the appendix. It's not that we're, but I'd love to know what other people think. I can see Justine wants to come in here.
Justine has got your hand. Justine.
Yes, I was just going to add there, Councillor Parry, that in terms of could children understand it, I think they talk about it now, actually. If they talk about their view of the world, if you just turn the phrase around for younger children in primary, they do that all the time in the RE lessons that they have. And I would emphasise what Pat said there about the pedagogy of the cycle of inquiry, because it's part of the cycle of inquiry that the child shares their views on concepts and their views of the world, if it is appropriate to that concept. And that's developed and built on as they bring in new ideas. There is lots of research around about what does it mean, and there needs to be more research done, because every conversation that Pat and I hear is always about what does it mean exactly. But it is useful to think about as we go through the syllabus review, and it particularly seems to resonate with us with that lived experience of communities, whether they're religious or not religious, and that emphasis on lived experience, I think, is definitely one feature of worldviews that we would say, yes, we can agree with that, and we think we have that emphasis already. So there's more work for us to do in articulating how we do that. But that's certainly one thing I would highlight, the emphasis on lived experience is important.
I think it's fair to say, in a way, what's represented by this discussion is more what we want to move away from. It's not quite clear where it's going, but in some religious education circles, now I don't think Hampshire, religious education has turned into a delivery of rather essentialized boxes of this is Islam, right? We're doing Islam for a few lessons. There it is, done, dusted. This is Sikh tradition, done, dusted. And here we're moving on to Hinduism. Now that's contested term. As if these were all separate, had no relationship with each other, no historical encounter, and that people living in those traditions didn't have a strong sense of the intermingling sometimes. And this is probably the main thing that we're trying to move beyond. But as Justine said, the emphasis on the lived experience is an important thing.
Pas, just picking up in the chat bar there, Yasmin's asked a really important question about, do we look at the historical context of a worldview? Yasmin, in the literature, another area that's generally agreed on is that all worldviews, whether they're religious or not, are centered around a particular context and period of time. And certainly we look at that, but I think we can make more of it, Yasmin. I think we can take that as a principle and build on it. And it's certainly the suggestion of the worldviews research that everyone should do that. So it's a really good point. It articulates that actually you don't have a fixed opinion if you're a Christian or a Sikh or a non-religious person. You don't, and that view never changes. And that's where the historical context comes in, because it does acknowledge views change and develop over time.
I think those of us who are probably the view of the RE Council is that things have moved very fast, and that we do need to slow this pace of change down a little bit to make sure that everybody's coming along with the journey, and that no foregone conclusions are drawn too quickly, because that could be worse than what is happening in some places at the moment. So I think, Councillor Parry, your alerting us to this is actually very important.
Thank you. Any other colleagues want anything to say or contribute on this? Presumably the term philosophy was considered at some stage and dismissed, that it's more than that, is it? Or
yes and no to both both of your. Not exactly. I mean, what exactly the RE Council, the Commission on RE, what went on behind in their discussions, we don't entirely know, but there was this intention to sort of shift things slightly. And in the end, the word worldviews was settled on, and it was very clearly it was religion and worldviews, not to lose either. I can see there are 3 people who are wanting to, perhaps Chris Hughes' hand went up first, I think, Councillor Perry. And then I see that Yasmin and Councillor McNair-Scott would like to speak.
I was going to ask whether the PowerPoints from yesterday will be available more widely to SACRA members. I know they were going to be available to the delegates, and whether there are any copyright issues about them being more widely available. Because I found that the presentation and the discussion about worldviews to be very, very helpful, because it helped me understand a bit more, certainly from the presenter's point of view, of how it was important in engaging students who had bad experiences of religious education or of religions. And so that was very helpful to understand what she was coming from. But as has been said, I think that it's very clear from her presentation that currently it's too imprecise. It's Humpty Dumpty. You know, it means what I want it to mean. And if we're going to have this with any educational merit, it needs to be a bit clearer what we're talking about. And maybe this iteration of our syllabus is not the right time, but it should be something that be kept for the next one.
Oh, you're muted, Chairman.
Still muted.
Councillor Perry, you're on mute.
I'm on mute and I'm saying, is Yasmin muted? Thank you, Justine. Appreciate that. Yasmin, have you unmuted yourself?
I was unmuted, yeah.
You were, okay, far away.
Thank you for that. I'm following on from Chris, to be honest. I just wanted to, a couple of things. What's the timescale on this? Pat said that we don't want to rush this conversation, because I feel this is it is something that we need to, the last time we looked at it was 1970, then we do need to have, quite a long discussion and around this subject. And if we're going to do that, for me, having run youth projects and things, and I actually listened to, youngsters, and I also heard from a parent that in the history curriculum, they were going to talk about the Crusades and they weren't going to mention the Islamic part of it. So I just wondered, which I thought was quite strange, really, because it's quite a big part of the Crusades, on the other side. But I get there's a time constraint when you're teaching curriculum. I get that there's, there's so much to teach. But I wonder, are we looking at putting in political elements to this? Because in certain worldviews, that is quite important. Are we looking at the social side of things? I mean, are we, we're going to open it up completely, or are we just, or is that still up for debate? That was kind of a couple of questions in there.
Very fair points. I'll ask Anna to make what comment she wants, and then perhaps Pat or Justine can give a response. Anna?
Right, yes, I think my microphone's off. I was just really remembering my first visit to a primary school to look at the living difference in practice was very small children, and they were talking about celebration. And it moved from your birthday to Christmas to what other faiths did and all the rest of it. And I think the kind of structures, that cycle of learning that Living Difference has always had, really lends itself to widening in the kind of worldview way, I feel that it's already quite a good step on the way to doing so. I don't know what you think, Justine, because you're doing it all the time.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is back to the pedagogy. And Yasmin's point there about what things could you bring in, because it could, if you look at lots of worldviews, it could be a whole list of things that people might feel they've got to add to the curriculum. I think generally people are thinking, no, that wouldn't work because there's too much out there. Where it does work is, as you say, Councillor McNair, that it's about the pedagogy. It's about bringing that in as you go around the cycle, some of which will be non-religious points of view, some of which might be from the religion you're studying, some of which might be actually from other religions. You know, I was sharing yesterday examples of people from other faiths and traditions who were talking about Christianity with some knowledge and expertise there. So I think that pedagogy lends itself to that, and it flows very well without making it a whole list of extra topics that you've got to include, because that won't work. We'll run out of time to do that.
Right.
Could I just come back? I wanted to say, Chris, that yes, the PowerPoint presentations from the conference yesterday, the Southwest Ariac Sacre Conference, where there were well over 50 people from Sacres from Portsmouth, Isle of Wight, Hampshire, all the way westwards down to the toe of Cornwall. The PowerPoints will be available to colleagues. Now, Justine, of course, was one of the workshop presenters, and I think we could ask Justine if she would share her PowerPoint with us. Yeah. Regarding Ruth Flanagan, who is the workshop that you're mentioning there, Chris, we could ask her if she would be happy if we shared that. Ruth is one of the speakers at the Hermeneutics seminar on the 15th, which if anybody's interested as well, as is Farid Pandrani. So these are the kind of people as well we're bringing to teachers. We can arrange that. I just wanted also to emphasize just to underscore again what Justine has said, is that we feel this pedagogical proposal that is Living Difference 4 is, I want to use the word strong, it's flexible enough to accommodate, to take into account many of the things that are being said. In fact, I think we've already been well ahead of the curve in much of this discussion. The main thing, though, I did want to say, and just to also respond to Yasmin, is that, of course, the law has not changed. The law is very clear about what counts as religious education. And when we finally bring to print what Living Difference 4 will be, it will have been checked by our Hampshire lawyers. So we're not entirely free to say, oh, we're doing this or we're doing that. So there's that practical point, as well as the legal point, as well as the theoretical and practical point, wanting to bring something really good that supports fabulous RE across Hampshire. That's it.
Right. Well, we've had a good debate on that, and that's very helpful. And if we could find out if the other slides are available, that would be helpful, I think, to members of SACRE. I'll certainly go away and read that paper you suggest, Pat. The recommendation is before us that we note the report and we agree to continue the discussion regarding the relationship of worldviews to religious education. Do we need to have a voting system on this, or can we? So if anybody raises an objection, then we'll vote. If not, I think we can take it that we agree that. I'm not seeing any hands raised, so that's agreed. So that takes us on to item 9, which is the South Central Sacre Hub. And we're going over to Pat to...
I'm going to hand to Justine for this.
Ah, okay.
Yep, so the South Central Sacre Hub was held in November last year, and we had a variety of Sacres that were present right across the south, really. We had Dorset, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, Hampshire, of course, Isle of Wight, Portsmouth, Southampton, East Sussex, Surrey, and also a representative from the diocese too. So we had very good representation at the Sacré Hub. We, as always, go round the hub and we ask each person there to update everybody else on current themes and current initiatives in their area. And lots of people talked about they are currently reviewing their own syllabus in their own areas. And they talked about the review processes for those, which are very similar to ours, of course, on Teams or Zoom. We also had quite a long conversation about how we were monitoring generally at the minute, because of course life is in the virtual world, and there was a variety of approaches there. All Sacrés, of course, are working hard to support and advise schools about RE, and that's part of their duty. They were doing that really in a virtual way. So offering support and advice through phone, through Teams, sharing resources that were shared online. Some were also looking at school websites and making that a focus for Sacré meetings and small subgroups to see what was mentioned about RE and what was mentioned about SMSC. A few were running network meetings, but they were all increasingly having plans to do more of the network meetings as the year went by. We also, as we've done today, we discussed worldviews too and the current research, and in particular we discussed that Theos report and the REC literature review, and we know we needed to have more time on that too. Something as well we shared was the Hampshire talk for teachers that Pat mentioned earlier, some of the keynotes that she's arranged for teachers that were open to anyone from the Sacrés to attend. And I talked as well about my arranged talk with Trevor Cooling on worldviews too. So that was very, very helpful. Our next meeting is in a couple of weeks' time, and we're looking at similar topics then. Again, the work of the Sacrés going forward, monitoring and how that's changed, and training that's coming up too. And again, we're expecting a wide range of Sacrés to attend.
Thank you. Any questions or comments to Justine on the South Central Sacré Hub? I'm not seeing any hands coming up, so I think we simply have to note the update. And members agree then that we note that. Thank you for that. And that takes us to agenda item 10, which is any other business. And if any members have any items they want to raise, I've asked here to give you a reminder that the NASACRE AGM is 24th of May in London. If it's not virtual, probably be virtual, I think, still at that stage. And then I said earlier on that those of us who are councillors have an important appointment with the electorate on the 6th of May that will determine who is there from the council. But I think all members of Sacré have to go through a process of renomination, reappointment, and letters will be sent out to all the organisations post the county council AGM in May. I think that's all I have to report there. And then I have got here the item 11, the date and venue of the next meeting, 29th of June, which I think, if I'm up to date, is post the 26th of June, which is the earliest date. I think if I've interpreted the Prime Minister correctly, when we can be meeting, so we'll have to watch what happens. Brazilians permitting, I think, might be the best way to. We don't know. So it may be. I think that every chance of it might be hybrid. So some will be able to gather together, but we will try and establish a facility that people can Zoom in if they wish to. And with that, I will thank you all for your attendance. Wish you well, and I shall be watching you remotely in future, but I certainly do applaud the work that Sacre does, and particularly, if I might say, and I think we should record the great work that Pat Hannam and Justine do. That really is appreciated and it's valued.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much indeed. And with that, I'll declare the meeting closed.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you.
Could I just echo Howard's
Howard, yeah.
comments from the beginning of the meeting?
Thank you.
We've
Yes.
been very privileged to have excellent chairmen for Sacre over many years. So both past and present chair who are here today, but also others too. So thank you so much. We are going to miss you both. And we look forward to it with excitement to see who succeeds you later.
Wayne is edging in there, so good luck.
Oh, you never know. You never know.